Let's get this underway. Thank you all very, very much for coming. The name of this panel is Adonde Vamos, Texas Hispanics and the Texas Future. My name is Joshua Trevino. In addition to being the Foundation's most unlikely Hispanic, I am also the Vice President for Communications at the Foundation, and so it's my privilege to serve with the extraordinary men and women who do all the good work that they do there. So thank you all very much for coming. This is a topic of profound importance, not only to Texas, but important on a personal level to a lot of us as well. Those of us with deep roots in South Texas and the Texas Hispanic community have, especially those of us who are involved in policy, have given this a lot of thought over the past several years and over our careers. And so it's good that we convene now to discuss these things. The story of Hispanics in Texas, it's an old one, and it predates not only the idea of Texas, but the United States itself. I can tell you that my paternal grandfather's hometown of Roma, Texas, was founded as the town of Los Saints by the Saints brothers in 1765. It's 11 years before the Declaration of Independence was even a gleam in Thomas Jefferson's eye. There are few things in the Americas that can claim genuine antiquity outside of the ruins of the Aztecs and what the Incans have left us. But in the United States itself, in America proper, the Hispanic presence in Texas, and especially in what is now the Rio Grande borderlands, are among the truly old and venerable facts of our national life. It is important to note that though Texas Hispanics were present from the days when Texas was a province of Mexico, they nonetheless cast their lot with Texas from the start. As early as the Terán expedition of 1828, a chronicler recorded that the Mexicans of Texas, quote, have adopted Anglo customs and habits, and one may truly say that they are not Mexicans except by birth, for they even speak Spanish with marked incorrectness. And though Tejanos who have experienced native Mexican attitudes today might find this rather familiar. Later, during the Texas Revolution, heroes like José Antonio Navarro, Lorenzo de Zavala, and Juan Seguin were indispensable to the success of the Lone Star State's fight for freedom. Seguin's band of Tejanos actually helped carry the day on the fields of San Jacinto, and when the young Republic of Texas interred the ashes of the heroes of the Alamo in 1837, he delivered public remarks in Spanish in San Antonio that included these lines. Here you have your brothers, Travis, Bowie, Crockett, and a few others, whose valor places them in the number of my heroes. The worthy remains of our venerable companions bearing witness, I ask you to tell the world that Texas shall be free and independent, or we shall perish with glory in battle. I think this is enough to demonstrate that whatever came later, in particular the alienation of Hispanic Texans during the so-called nadir of American race relations from roughly 1890 through 1920, that the historical truth is that when we talk about Texas Hispanics, we are talking about a people and a heritage that has been Texan and Texas from the start. We are here today to discuss, as the panel topic says, Texas Hispanics and the Texas Future, explicitly because Texas Hispanics have already shaped the Texas past. The legendary historian of Texas, T.R. Fehrenbach, many years ago characterized the story of Texas history as the story of the collision of Anglos, Mexicans, and Indians. Now, the tragic decline and eventual removal of the Indians of Texas is a topic best left to poets and writers like S.C. Gwynn, but the other two elements in Fehrenbach's equation remain, if leavened by the increasing extraordinary and most welcome diversity of modern Texas. Anglos and Mexicans, Fehrenbach might say, still drive the story of Texas. Well, as a child of both groups, I don't think it's quite that simple, but I do think that the Mexican side of the equation deserves a closer look. That is the Hispanic side of the equation. And because you're here, I assume that you do as well. The men we have assembled on this panel, the men to my right, are the right men to lead this examination. Congressman Kiko Canseco of San Antonio, although his district stretches to an extent larger than most states, is a former small business owner and a conservative activist, and he has already made a name for himself in the U.S. House of Representatives as one of the few freshmen selected to serve on the Financial Services Committee. State Representative Raul Torres of Corpus Christi entered elected office in the wave election of November 2010 and was shortly thereafter honored by the Texas Municipal League as its 2011 Legislator of the Year. And George Rodriguez of San Antonio has followed an honorable career in public and private service, including service in both the administrations of Ronald Reagan and George H.W. Bush, is now the first Hispanic president of a Tea Party. Why do we want to conduct this examination? The proximate cause is obvious. The 2010 U.S. Census revealed Texas to be nearly 40% Hispanic and only about 45% non-Hispanic white. The former number is climbing, and the latter is declining. And it's likely that the 2020 U.S. Census will show Hispanics to constitute a plurality, if not an outright majority of Texans. In that light, no responsible engagement with public policy is possible without engaging the needs, wants, desires, hopes, fears, and aspirations of Hispanic Texans. Now let me say something up front on that count. Those hopes, fears, and aspirations are not necessarily all that different from those of Texas Anglos, African Americans, etc. The Texas Public Policy Foundation this past year had the privilege of conducting a series of Hispanic outreach roundtables across the state in cooperation with George Rodriguez. We went to Houston, McAllen, San Antonio, and Laredo and talked about education, business policy, and healthcare policy. And what we found was that the concerns of the Hispanic community include several key items. There are hopes related to the extraordinary growth of small business ownership in the Texas Hispanic community. It's exploded over the past decade. But there are also fears concurrent with that federal regulation, including Dodd-Frank in particular, will lead to a credit squeeze that will quash the burgeoning Hispanic entrepreneurial class. There is concern over inadequate education that leaves Hispanic Texans ill-equipped to the needs of the modern workforce. And there is deep concern over social mores that sometimes decay and have led to some small business owners, and we especially saw this in the Valley, explicitly stating that they prefer to hire Mexican immigrants over native Tejano young men. And finally, there is a deep, deep concern over a perceived lack of respect for Hispanics by many on the national stage. This is a particularly fraught question, and it's one I hope our panelists will address. I've spoken enough. It's time to let our panelists speak. This is a tremendously important question. This is perhaps the major question that, in addition to the fiscal questions following us, that is going to shape Texas in the coming decade. And I'm very grateful to you all being here. And with all this being said, I would like to cede the stage to Congressman Kiko Canseco. And Congressman, over to you.
Thank you very much, Josh. And it's a privilege being here. It's a privilege being flanked by my friend George and my friend Raul Torres here to my right. And it's a privilege being with you here today to broach this very interesting topic. To add to the flavor of what Josh pointed out, I think that those of us that are from Jim Hogg County or from Roma or from Laredo or from other areas around the border, in Spanish you say, así le empujamos, this is the way we push it. But down there in those areas you say, asigna lo puchamos. And these are colloquialisms that go back more than 200 years. They're still alive today, and you can see it in a very picturesque way along the border. But with that said, I want to get into what we're here for. As the Hispanic population continues to grow within the American society, so does its influence. In greater numbers, we are becoming small business owners, doctors, lawyers, and other professionals. Hispanics like me are also ascending to elected office in greater numbers. In the 2010 elections, 6 new Hispanics were elected to the United States House of Representatives and 1 to the United States Senate. As the American population of Hispanic descendants grows, not just in size but in influence, what does all this mean for public policy? There are some that would have you believe that Hispanics only care about a narrow set of certain issues like immigration or welfare programs. Such a view of Hispanics reinforces the belief that for all purposes, Hispanics are democratic voters and should be seen as a monolithic bloc that you have to appeal to on democratic issues. This is a view that Democratic political establishment would like Republicans to have, and thus minimize the effort to engage the Hispanic community and leave the Democrats all alone to reap the benefits of a fast-growing demographic. What I learned from my friends and family and going door to door and meeting with thousands of Hispanic voters in my district is that simply is not the case. From my experience, the Flores family living in Del Rio, Texas is probably going to care as much about the same issues that the Smith family does in Helotes, Texas. Hispanics are American, and just like other Americans, are looking for the way to climb to the next rung of the ladder, looking for a way to achieve their American dream. They're looking for policies, whether local, state, or federal, that empowers Hispanics and ensures them that they have just as much opportunity as other Americans. From my experience, Hispanics, just like most other Americans, are going to care about the issues based on whether they are where they are in life, and characteristics such as income, education, religious views, and the like. Those are more likely to influence their politics rather than their ethnicity. Yet that's not to say that because of where the American population of Hispanic ancestry are as a whole, that public policy decisions might not present different challenges. For instance, Hispanic small business owners are a large and fast-growing segment of small business ownership. They're going to face the same challenges that other small business owners face. Yet those challenges may be amplified and even greater for Hispanic small business owners. And I think that a good illustration of how Hispanic small business owners can face a unique set of challenges can be found by looking at the impact of the Dodd-Frank financial regulation bill. And while this massive law, its complication and lengthy impact, what impact it's going to have on small business owners is that it's going to drive up the cost of borrowing money, of forming capital, of creating their business, and ultimately perhaps restricting these small businesses access to credit. And small businesses are going to be restricted in growth and innovation. The cost of credit is going to go up simply because of all the new regulations with which financial institutions must comply. This means that they have to hire more employees to work on compliance, and this means that innovation will be severely limited. This is a cost of doing business that is going to be passed on to consumers in the form of higher costs of borrowing, higher fees, and in many other ways. And while they didn't go forward with them, you've already seen banks considering raising fees for using debit cards because of the Dodd-Frank law. The Dodd-Frank law also empowers numerous regulators to ensure we prevent the next financial crisis by cracking down on risk in the financial sector. Yet supporters of the law claim all of these new rules will not impact the availability of credit, especially to small businesses. All it takes is a conversation with a community bank or a small business to realize this is not the case. With this lack of clarity and constant threat of sanctions by federal regulators if they extend a loan that is deemed to be too risky or fails to extend a loan to someone who is otherwise qualified, financial institutions will have little choice except to cut back lending and only make loans in situations where such a loan would satisfy both sets of regulators. And this essentially gives power to a Washington bureaucracy to determine what loans a financial institution can and cannot make, and says a faceless bureaucrat who many have never seen set foot in Texas, much less the community, knows better than a loan officer sitting at a community bank and who actually knows the customer. This could result in small businesses having less or no access to capital to get started or to expand their business. Dodd-Frank is making it very hard for a financial institution to look at a business plan, see its good idea, and then make the loan. While this is going to impact small businesses overall, Hispanic small businesses are going to be hit even harder because, as a group, Hispanic small business owners are getting started in greater numbers and thus generally more risky to a loan officer rather than expanding existing small businesses. Hispanic small businesses are being started in greater and greater numbers, and this is a good thing, as those business owners want to take state capital and take a risk on an idea, all in the hope of achieving the American dream. Unfortunately, while Dodd-Frank has raised the cost of the American dream for all small business owners, it has imposed an additional surcharge on Hispanic small business owners. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Representative Torres.
Thank you, Congressman. Thank you, George. I'm honored to be here on this panel. I learned a long time ago, you don't take everything too seriously. Kind of relax. This is a serious issue, but also with this comes the real-life stories. people like Mr. Guzman back home, and Mr. Garcia and Mr. Gonzalez, and Mrs. Rodell, a young Hispanic lady who started a business after she failed twice. Real life stories, real life people who have, as the Congressman said at least twice, the desire for the American dream. But sometimes, like I've always told my children, I said to all 5 of them, I said, life is cruel. And life has in itself stored for us many lessons to be learned. And we can learn them the easy way by looking past into history and learning from the mistakes and the impact certain activities and actions had on people, or we can learn the hard way. Ignore history, ignore sound principles that work, and forge forward with a different idea. Well, today I want to share with you a little brief report that we put together, my staff and I, on the state of Latino or Hispanics in Texas, both from an educational standpoint and an employer standpoint. And I hope at the end, if nothing else I want to accomplish, is to give you a broad overview of where we stand as a community in the state. Because in due time, ladies and gentlemen, in due time, what's good for the Hispanic population is going to be good for Texas. So let's begin. Here's some quick data that we got from the Census Bureau. 20 million back in 2000. In Texas, 32% were Hispanic, as you can see the breakdown there. Fast forward to 2010, we grew by approximately about 4 million, 38% Hispanic now, and as you see the breakdown there. The trend is there. According to the Census Bureau, Texas now has the largest Hispanic population in the United States. According to the U.S. Department of Education, Hispanic K through 12 students in Texas compose 48% of all the students there. And it's not going to drop, it's only going to increase. Hispanics are without question the fastest growing demographic. We increased population by 20%. Of that 20%, 65% of that group were Hispanics. Currently, 9.5 million households have Hispanics in them. 18.8 million Hispanics live in Texas, and the number's going to grow. It's projected by 2040, forgive me, and projected to be the #1 demographic group in 8 short years, in the blink of an eye. So what does it mean to us in Texas? To what does it mean to legislators, policymakers, decision makers, business owners? What does all this mean as we see the trend over the last 20 years unfold before our eyes? It means that greater than 50% of all future workforce employees will be Hispanic. Greater than 50%. Industry, as you and I both know, rely on a well-trained workforce and a well-educated workforce to remain competitive and to remain profitable. So if 50% of this group is going to be Hispanic, then in order for us to maintain ourselves as a strong economic state, as one of the largest producers in the world, then we must have an educated workforce, we must have a well-trained workforce for us to continue. Currently, the state of Hispanic education is this. Just look at these figures. Generally speaking in Texas, according to the National Center for Higher Education, says that in Texas, 33% of adults between the ages 25 to 64 have earned an associate's degree or higher, compared to a national average of 38%. Now let's break that down into just the Hispanic population in Texas, or the Latino population. 16% of the Latinos between 25 to 64 years old have attained an associate degree or higher. We can't even match the Texas average. 33%. Texas average, 16%, almost half is Latinos. Not trending well. Oh, I'm sorry. That's right, I got it. So what does this mean? If the trend continues, ladies and gentlemen, Texas is projected to have a workforce shortage in the future. If we're going to be 50% of the employable base, and we do not have the degrees, we do not have the skills, then Texas will be lacking employees, qualified employees. Industry will be lacking qualified skilled labor, and industry will be lacking qualified, degreed employees to lead their companies into the future. Not a pretty sight. We haven't even applied the dollar value to this yet. They're painting a broad picture, potentially resulting in perhaps the following: reduced employee productivity. As technology changes over time in the short run, and it does very quickly, and we have a less educated, less skilled workforce, productivity will decline. Less economic development in Texas. Why? Because employees are going to leave Texas. If they can't find the right kind of people, they're going somewhere where they can, so they can make a profit, so they can produce the product or the service that they need. Industry will have to import skilled labor from other states and other countries for those who choose to stay in Texas. Here's a picture at a dropout rate based strictly on race or ethnicity. The top line, the purple, is right there, is a Hispanic group, demographic. Beats every other group all the way around. No matter if you run from 1996 all the way to 2007. Why? Are Hispanics just born less intelligent? We have less brain cells? Why is that trend the way it is? Interesting question. Trends. Dropouts rates are not only higher for Hispanics in high school, ladies and gentlemen. As you're going to see in a minute, this also translates into college. Doesn't change. And we also know that they are concentrated, Hispanics are concentrated in urban and border regions throughout the state. And according to the experts, they're projected to be 3 times greater than any other ethnic group in 2012 at the rate that they're dropping out. So what does this mean to us? As policymakers, business owners, legislators, senators, governors, etc., congressmen, the Texas economy will suffer because of these dropouts. The trend will just have an impact. Because dropouts earn almost $5,000 less per year than graduates. And because of that, they'll contribute less into the state coffers, which is approximately 70% of our general revenues come from sales tax. And if they're earning less money, they'll be having less disposable income, which will result in less sales tax and revenues for the state. Resulted in, on the other end, while they're earning less, paying less into the system, they're drawing more, $2,117 projected per year per person in welfare costs. You know, people lie. We do it all the time in our society, and some people go, oh, it's just a little white lie. Don't worry about it. But numbers don't lie. They're just black and white. As an accountant and CPA, they're just numbers. They just speak on their own. Let them speak for themselves. And because of that, finally, not only that, because of all of these other factors we've taken a good look at, Hispanics will have a higher probability to find a new home in one of our prison cells. And as we all know, approximately $30,000 a year is what you and I pay to put somebody in prison. Solution. Is there a solution to these trends? Is there an answer? Is there this dynamic new revelation that someone has not uncovered through years of study and analysis? Well, we know this. If, in fact, this trend is allowed to maintain its course, then the numbers are self-evident. The upper and lower bound are the two averages of evaluating high school dropouts. So based on the numbers, using present value, earned income, those are the numbers that you can see right here. Present income, present value deceased welfare costs, decrease present value of incarceration costs, present value to educate them. And so the answer is, if we are willing to put more money, yes, I know, where are we going to get it from? Then this is what we're going to get. So, sorry about that. Let's go back, page up.
There we go.
Okay. All right. So, changing the course. Education must include a redefinition of Texas must change its definition of education. When I sat there in the appropriations hearing and I heard the education chairman say education is to prepare every child to go to college, it's not true. Not every child's going to college. I'm sorry. Some of them just don't want to. Some of them don't have. So, that being said, I just want to finish up. Education must include a path towards an academic degree. At the same time, it includes a path to a job skill. And let the student pick. And finally, understanding the social and economic issues that are related, that are embedded into the Hispanic culture is crucial for us to grab a hold of this monster and turn it around and turn a big demographic group into a very positive, growing portion of our economy as we look forward. Because these are real people with the names of Gonzalez, Torres, Martinez, etc. Thank you.
And George Rodriguez.
Thank you. Good afternoon, folks. As has already been indicated, I am president of the San Antonio Tea Party. I am the first Hispanic to serve as president of a Tea Party, and consequently, sometimes because of my Tea Party bias, I have a tendency to channel Ann Coulter, and that gets me in trouble sometimes. At any rate, the thing that I would like to share with you is a meeting. What we found in a meeting that we held in San Antonio with Tea Party Hispanics and with GOP Hispanics and various other folks that we invited. We invited about 20 individuals, and we had this discussion regarding how to develop a message. How can we develop a message, and what's it going to take to get a conservative message into the Hispanic community, or how to communicate a conservative message to the Hispanic community? We came up with several things, with several suggestions. First of all, the first suggestion was that we have a message that is values-based. Being that there is a culture within the Hispanic community of faith, family, and country, that's where we would start. We would start with a faith-based, with a values-based message. Secondly, we used the word conservative a whole lot more. We found that whenever the word Republican is used, there was almost like an automatic wall that falls. Yet when we used the word conservative, people were more responsive. What was also very, very curious is that in many communities in San Antonio, and I want you to know we have well over a 6,000 name list of supporters on our database. Well over 40% of them are Hispanic. So for when somebody says that the Tea Party scares Hispanics, tell them to come to San Antonio. Tell them to come to San Antonio. Les decimos en inglés or en español, either way. So anyway, the third thing that we found was that we needed to talk about positive moral values and the erosion that's going on in to the Hispanic family and the community. The Great War on Poverty has really done a number on the black family, and it's doing it on the Hispanic family now. It is really happening. We find grandmothers left and right taking care of kids. We find girls dropping out of school because of pregnancy. We find in San Antonio, in Bexar County, second and third pregnancies for girls 18 and younger. I mean, that's incredible in the Hispanic community. That's incredible. I remember when I was growing up, no one even talked about children being born out of wedlock. Yet it is very common now, and it's destroying the Hispanic community. And when you say that, people respond. The other thing is that we've got to emphasize that we are all Americans. Enough of this issue of celebrating diversity. That hasn't helped us. All that's done is dropped more barriers and created more segregation for our people. Fifth, it was suggested that Hispanic conservatives, and this is a very important one, Hispanic conservatives, Tea Party folks mostly, and Hispanic GOP leaders have a frank dialogue about the issue of immigration. One of the headaches that we've got is how do we talk about immigration to the Hispanic community? The mainstream media and And the liberals have run off with it, and all it is just a stick to beat us with. However, when we sit down and we articulate our vision and our ideas about immigration to Hispanics, they say, well, that makes perfect sense, common sense. And that's what we need to do. We need to have a frank, common sense discussion among ourselves and then present that idea to begin to use that message in the Hispanic community. Then there's the issue of the methods on how to deliver our message. There is no Rush Limbaugh in Spanish. There is no Sean Kennedy in Spanish. And we feel that that's very, very critical. We feel that when you talk about the Hispanic community, you got to ask yourself, which Hispanic community? Are you talking about the Hispanics which are already assimilated and acculturated and who might be liberal because that's what they think, but who usually they're conservative if you just preach to them and talk to them a little bit? They respond like anybody else. Are you talking about the bilingual, bicultural ones? The vast majority in South Texas that speak both languages and live in both worlds. And for some reason, folks, these folks continue to vote liberal only because their parents did. Because when you can ask them, why do you vote like that? I don't know. They don't know. They don't know. They just do it. The other thing is, which Hispanic community, we can't lose sight of trying to speak to and educate the new immigrants, whether they're illegal or not. Educating them, because right now the only thing they're hearing in my, I don't want to be nasty to our Univision friends, but the only time they ever hear, or the only thing they ever hear, are nothing but from the liberal side in Spanish, blah blah blah. They're doing this. I mean, I freaked out, absolutely freaked out, and I had to call Univision and just rant on them during the summer when the issue of the voter ID was being debated, and one of the reporters had the nerve to say that there had never been any documented cases of voter fraud in South Texas. So I ran over there and I took him a book about the Duke of Duval, okay, and Box 13, and those weren't polls; those were not checks that were involved in that fraud, So those we've got to address that thing. The other issue is, when we talk about reaching out into the Hispanic community, we've got to talk about involvement, not just outreach. The congressman and I had a great conversation the other day, and he's taught me about this, and it's true. We've got to talk about involvement. We've got to let people see Hispanics involved in the Texas Public Policy Foundation because they think that's only gringos. He does. I mean, with all due respect to Josh, they do. Right. We haven't decided, but it's true. They've got to see, involvement. It's more than it's more than just going in and taking a message and then leaving. And that's the other thing. There's got to be a two-pronged approach to this. To the community through the media, like I've been saying, but also the formation of personal relationships. In the Hispanic culture, personal relationship is everything. And that one-on-one communication is extremely, extremely important. And so we've got to do it in both ways. In one way, we've got to make sure that we can carry the message in there through the media, whether it's in English or in Spanish, or through pictures, whatever we want to do. And we've got to be able to go in there, shake hands, say hello, talk to people. Okay? We've got to be able to establish, because I'll tell you that the only thing that they hear in the Hispanic community right now, the only presence that there exists in there are poverty programs. Okay? And do you think that those poverty programs are going to talk about budget cuts? They make us as to be the evil people. It's so easy for them to classify us as evil because, well, we're against immigration. I mean, we're going to separate families. They've reduced all of their arguments to doggone sound bites. This past summer, when I was involved in a NPR, and I should have known better than to go to NPR for a debate, but I did. What the heck? right in the middle of the debate, we had a question and answer period, and I had an Anglo teacher from a Hispanic, predominantly high school, get up and accuse me of being a Nazi. Quiet, everybody, oh, but that was it, that was it. When they can't argue anymore, they reduce it to name calling. So folks, let me give you my phone number, because if you want to talk to me further, I'll be glad to talk to you further. Let me give you my phone number. It's 210-367-2058. 210-367-2058.
Those of you on Twitter, don't put George's phone number on Twitter.
Please.
All right. Thank you so much, George.
You got it.
A lot of good things being said, and I really want to extend sincere appreciation to the three panelists for taking the time to give their presentation. We do have time for Q&A, and I'm happy to bring my own cues to the table, but I think we have some in the audience. Ma'am, would you like to start off?
Yes. Hi, I'm Vanessa Marquez from El Paso. I have two questions. One, the first is for Representative Torres, my colleague here. You did a good job of laying out exactly. Oh, I'm sorry. Do I really need that? Okay. You did a good job of rolling out. We knew that for a long time, that the Hispanics was the largest growing population. What do you think is the state's role in accommodating that growth? And the other question is for Mr. Rodriguez, so you have time to. Is immigration, what's the starting point?
Thank you, Marisa. Good question. I believe the state's role is the same role it has toward every other person in Texas. Give them an opportunity, equal opportunity, to obtain the best education that student wants to achieve. Also give them an opportunity to obtain the career path that they choose is best for them, providing them those opportunities equally. But there's something in the culture that's unique to Hispanics that's going to require special attention. I'll give you a point. According to a study that I got in the Washington, D.C. conference I went to about Latino higher ed, 80% of Latinos go to community colleges. And yet 80% of those who go to community colleges have to take remedial courses. Roughly, I'm running out to percentages here. And 85% of those who take remedial courses never finish. So the program that is laid out for them to succeed, because the remedial course is identifying that they're weak in some subject area and need some strengthening skills, so take this course. What the study showed is that basically that disincentivizes the student and they never finish. So the program doesn't work. But all we do is keep doing the same thing over, and everybody knows what Einstein says. Insanity is doing the same thing over and over and expecting a different. We have to change how the program is structured, number one. Number two, we have to better fund community colleges. If they are the ones having to deal with this type of population, demographic group, that are being challenged with these cultural issues, then we need to give them the resources. I visited with my local community college, and he says, Raul, I would love to, but we're strapped. I just don't have the resources to help them in those areas that they need attention in. So I think we need to spend more time giving more attention to community colleges that deals with this population group, so that we can turn those results around. Right now, most of the attention, as I believe it to be a fact, is given to predominantly the Tier 1 colleges in Texas, or the Tier 2 colleges. There's where most of the focus is. There's where the media pays its attention. There's where the R&D is. There's where all the big football games and basketball and national championships and all that take place. But where the rubber meets the road is in the community colleges for the Hispanic population.
Okay. Your question was the starting point for immigration.
You mentioned it as one of the points about your particular organization, and you did talk about immigration being one of those.
Yes.
So where would you see the starting point on that argument?
Okay, the problem that we've always got is that we always talk about the starting point and then the screaming begins, okay? So hopefully that won't happen here. We believe very, very strongly that the first thing that has got to happen is to secure the border. I mean, there's no two ways around it. We've got to secure the border. The second thing after that, though, that's got to happen is that we've got to have a temporary worker program. If we're going to lure the people out of the shadows, if we're going to bring them out so that they register and show themselves as being here, they're already here illegally, okay, fine and dandy, they're already working. Let them get a worker permit and a worker program so that they can begin. And then that way, there can be a manner in which they can safely cross back and forth without having to depend on a coyote or anything or anyone of that type. And I guarantee that if we tried to do that at least, then we could lure the people out of the shadows. But the headache is that we can't even get to that point of the discussion or beyond that point of the discussion, because I'm sorry, I feel very, very strongly we've got to secure the border first.
Let me add I'm not interrupting you, am I?
Nope.
By any chance? Okay. Let me add a historical note to that, to what George is saying on the immigration question in particular, and I'll preface it by saying that immigration is not an issue that TPPF deals with. So I'm simply going to tell you what's freely available on Wikipedia at this point. But one of the things that's been interesting for us in the past year, especially given the vicissitudes of presidential politics, is that we've had a lot of national journalists and writers come in to Texas and talk to us about Texas uniqueness and Texas history. And I actually had the opportunity to, I will name drop here because it's the only name I've got to drop. Bill Keller at the New York Times actually came and sat down and talked to me and several other colleagues at TPPF about Texas history, and he asked specifically about immigration. And one of the things that I was able to share with him that I think probably figuratively made his head explode and was a surprise to him, but it's a surprise to a lot of people. It's a surprise even to Texans. Is Texas history with regard to immigration affairs. And George Rodriguez mentioned his belief that there needs to be a guest worker program. Well, in fact, many of you probably know we had a guest worker program from the Second World War all the way through the mid-1960s. It was called the Bracero Program, and it was specifically limited to the agricultural sector. Now, the Bracero Program was initially created to respond to the manpower shortage in the agricultural sector created by the Second World War. All the eligible young men had been drafted up, and so there was a need to essentially import labor from Mexico, and the federal government implemented this guest worker program called the Bracero Program to allow Mexicans to move back and forth more or less freely on a seasonal basis between Mexico and the United States to work the fields. Now, what was interesting is that when it was implemented in 1942, it was an opt-in by the states. Of course, as with all federal opt-ins, they do whatever they can to pressure the states in. But initially, there was one state that opted out of the Bracero Program, and that was Texas. And the reason that Texas opted out was because Texas had an explicit preference for a totally open border in all sectors, a complete free movement of labor in all sectors. And so that's something that really speaks to sort of the uniqueness of Texas history, and maybe something fruitful to contemplate as we talk about, as George said, a topic that tends to make us perhaps scream. Any other questions? Yes, sir, Congressman. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Well, Representative, I didn't want to be discriminated against on the questions, but I want to add in and chime in very briefly that what Representative Torres said is very, very true. The state's role is to make sure and tend to all of its population, not just specifically one or another. Now that there may be regions that are very, very needy, maybe the border area with an enormous amount of health problems, with a lack of education, that's another thing. But we also have to remember that we need to temper that in a way that does not embolden those populations to continue to seek help when they don't need it.
Exactly.
And I'm going to give you an example. In my district, Zavala County, down there very, very often, ran into the manager of the HEB and says, I have a need for 26 new employees. And there are a lot of people, young kids out there, that are already capable to work. But they tell me, why should I do that if I'm on welfare? And I pick up food stamps. And I can go stay home and watch TV and play video games and drink beer. What we're doing as a society is that we are pandering to certain segments of our population and exacerbating a problem that exists, that we should be able to do it in the right way, and we don't pander to it, but we eliminate what it is. We are, as a society, Texans, Americans, all of us, we are a very beneficent organization or group of people. We tend to those that are really needy, the infirm, the disabled, the elderly. We tend to them. But unfortunately what happens is that government promotes a lot of other people to jump along the way and take advantage of it, and what it does is that it proliferates a problem from one generation to another. Why continue going to school if you can stay home, drink beer, and collect food stamps?
Generation, are you talking about Texans or are you talking about Hispanics?
I'm talking about Texans. I don't talk about Hispanics or otherwise. I talk about Texans. Because I'm a Texan, you're a Texan, we're all Texans. And we have many faces in Texas. And Texas deals with Texans. And it deals with Texas issues. Whether they're border issues, whether there are health care issues or education issues, they are all unique to Texas. Not like California does or like Arizona does. We deal with them as Texas does. And I want to also switch over to the immigration thing. And I know that Public Policy Forum does not deal with immigration issues, but I want to say this. There has been an abject refusal on the part of the federal government for a number of years past and present to deal with the issue of immigration and to deal with the issue of it realistically, so that if you come in with a visa, whether it's a student visa or a visitor's visa or whatever, they lose sight of you. You're lost into the system. And we don't really want to care. And we have all this convergence of conflict that come on board here that are just burdening our systems, our hospitals, our health care, and our other social systems. And we have serious problems. I was on the board of a hospital in Laredo for many years. And we almost went broke, not just once, but several times, because we were obligated to take in an enormous amount of indigent patients. And it was just busting us because of the rules that have come down from the federal government, because of the rules that we have, and they're just destroying our social system, and an unwillingness on the part of the federal government to make sure that those rules and regulations are enforced. And cities that go along with disparate groups that feel that they're going to plague the population with guilt by saying, let them be free and don't enforce the law of the land.
Let's.
My thoughts and my comments were not to spark a party rhetoric debate. I was just, if you were up there giving a presentation, I just wanted to kind of narrow in on the solutions that you all have brought.
Right. Good.
All right,
I'm just turning a page where you left it open.
Next question. Yes, sir.
Yes, just a comment. Mr. Torres, I think, is correct on the education part, but I work with the Austin School District sort of on ad hoc committees looking at the judicial system and so forth. And what we find is that the Austin School District is 59% Hispanic. And one of the problems is you don't teach school anymore if you're a teacher. You're part teacher and part social work. Yep. Because you got to take care of the families there, like communities and schools is a great thing that takes care of a significant number of them. But we have a lot of families. We get the families stabilized and get the kids to where they, are eating regularly and got their clothes looking pretty good and stabilized in the household. They'll stay in school, they'll get through high school, and they'll go somewhere. But our problem is to keep them, go with this dysfunctional family group and get more people involved in that process. And we're pushing on the school district to do that. But that's where the problem lies right now.
I think I see the same thing down in South Texas, sir, and that's a very difficult thing to put your arms around because you can't legislate morality and you can't force parents to be good parents, and that's very difficult. But I do know that based on my mother's story, she said, Raul, and she told me when she was raising us as a single mom, she said, I never asked for a handout. It was her personal responsibility, she said, to take care of her family. Now, that was the value she was brought up with. So she made that decision for her family. And she often worked 3 jobs, and I hardly ever saw her. What's happened to our society over time is that we have gotten away from not only teaching those values, but from holding people responsible for their own behavior. And we make it too easy for people to walk away.
And let me add to that I think, and I guess I'll go ahead and channel some Ann Coulter right now. I think what we've got, and we're going to have to be very, very blunt, we being Hispanics, we have a cultural problem in the Hispanic community. We've got a cultural problem. If the majority of our people do not want to encourage our kids to dress like they should dress properly instead of walking around with their pants down below their butts, if they think that that's okay, if they think that having children at the age of 16 is okay, if they think that just going to sit at school and occupy time and space is good, well then, I'm sorry, you get what you deserve. And it's time for people to draw the line and say, that's what you deserve when you have poor behavior. It's about behavior, people. And, you know, if you say it, you're a racist. If I say it, well, they can call me a Nazi, but what the heck? You know? I can respond back in Spanish. The thing is that we have got to draw the line on our own folks and say, stop it. Change your habits. Every immigrant group in this country has faced the same headaches that we have. There just happens to be more of us. That's the difference. And it's time for us. The liberal social welfare system is destroying our community. Bottom line.
Any other questions? Yes, ma'am, in the back.
Thank you. Mr. Rodriguez, this question is for you. As a young minority myself reaching out to my fellow peers, there is a challenge of communicating the message of conservatism. One thing I appreciate that you all have said is that we're Texans and we're Americans. So stopping the division by race, I think, is the first and foremost thing. Can you provide any other comments or tips for my generation who are trying to make a stand and how to get past those walls of liberalism and really make an impact in our generation?
I really don't think that you can do it. It's got to be done by the individual. You can't do it as a huge group because, you know, it's got to be the individual that just stands and says, hey, I'm not going to worry that I'm a minority. I mean, I remember when my mother registered me. I'm the youngest of 7. When my mother registered me, I was the first one to attend an integrated school in San Antonio of my siblings. All my siblings went to all predominantly Hispanic high schools or schools in Laredo or in San Antonio. I remember the day that I got registered, 2 teachers were very, very rude and nasty to my mother while she was registering me. I was one of 5 kids. It didn't scar me. I learned, some people don't like you. Some people don't like me because I wear glasses. Some people don't like me because of the way I talk. You know, there's people I don't like because they got funny mustaches or because of the way they walk. You know, they don't wear the right deodorant. You know, there is always something. If you concentrate on the negative that is most visible, your culture, your ethnicity, you're whipped. You're whipped. And that's what the kids have got to learn. They're Americans. They're different, but they're Americans. And if you keep accentuating that you're different, you will always be different. That's all there is to it. If you keep accentuating, well, I'm Hispanic. Well, okay, so you're always going to be Hispanic. ¿Y qué? You know? So all I can tell them is get over it.
Next question. Any questions? Yes, ma'am. Yes, absolutely. It's on your way.
Representative Torres, when you're talking, Representative Torres, talking about the dropout rates, what do you think the best way to combat that is? Starting at the elementary school level? Do you think mentoring? What do you think are solutions to that problem?
You mentioned mentoring. That's in back homes, they talk a lot about using mentors or asking for volunteers for mentoring. So to what percentage of time, I'm not sure, but obviously that's going on already. It doesn't seem to be working. Dropout rates are based on a very complex set of issues. You got cultural issues, you got parent issues, you got system issues. You know, some schools are better than others. You have, and within the schools, you have complexities of different types of management styles and personalities and accountability standards, et cetera, even though they don't say that, but the result is they do. So how do you get all that to work and click? I think the formula could be more structured toward a private school, where the standards are very rigid, the requirements are very rigid, and I remember when we put my daughter in a private school, the rules were very simple. Mr. Torres, if we have to call you or if your daughter conducts herself in a way that violates these rules, we will place a call. You will be required to be here within X amount of time. And when you get here, we're going to ask you to take care of the problem. There's the room. If you want to paddle, here it is. If you don't, but there's the room. We expect that problem to be resolved, or your child doesn't go to school here anymore. I know that's a little harsh and rigid. We're not used to hearing people talk that firm and stern with ourselves because, after all, we are public schools, and they are entitled to get an education. But somewhere between that model and this model is where we need to find the right solution. But I think it's going to be more toward this model. I just finished speaking at a charter school. On a Saturday morning, 9:30, at an award assembly, over 300 parents. It was rainy and cold, and they were there. So their child could get a little bitty trophy. Not all of them got it, just the top 3 winners. Talk about parent involvement, talk about interest, talk about a different mentality. Perhaps it does hinge on what George said, culturally. That's a long road ahead. But the sooner we get started on that program, as soon as we get government, not to try that it legislates morality, but to try to teach good behavior instead of rewarding negative behavior, then I think we can start turning that dropout rate around. The resources are there. The staff is wanting them to do well. But when this child doesn't want to, the parent doesn't get involved, all the money in the world you throw at it, it's not going to change it.
Any other questions?
This is to the entire panel. What is your opinion of bilingual public education? Is it good as is? Need to be expanded? Need to be shrunk? What's your general opinion?
Would you like to go, Mr. Congressman?
Well, I'm going to give you my personal opinion, and it's based on experience to a certain extent. I think that there is room for the right kind of what you call bilingual education. There are many children that come from a household that is monolingual, which is Spanish or something else. And you have to achieve a certain mainstream at a certain point. If the goal is that by the time they get to the 4th grade or the 5th grade or whatever grade the system designs or designates, that both the monolingual English and the monolingual Spanish are now mainstreamed and joined together, well, that's good. It helps out. It helps the child that comes out of a Spanish-speaking home to mainstream, but so long as there is a goal to mainstream with the other children in the class. That's the good kind of bilingual education, but there are many forms of it and many theories and many philosophies about it that sometimes just don't work. I adhere to the idea that this nation has always survived on the 3 pillars of a common language, observance of the rule of law, and the Constitution. And the minute you start destroying one of those pillars, then we're dead as a society. And I have personally seen bilingual societies that are split and apart. Canada for one, Belgium for another, and we can go on and on and on. Those are not cohesive societies.
We have time for one more audience question. Is there anyone? Sorry? Yes, sir.
So my wife doesn't speak English very well, so the comment about Spanish language media being undiverse, how does that become more diverse?
Well, what we're going to need to do is literally, what we did in San Antonio was confront them. I mean, literally. And there was some anxiety from some of our conservative GOP Hispanics. Said, no, we need to keep them as our friend. You know how the Tea Party is. We confronted them, and we said, cut it out, or we're going to file with the FCC, or we're going to go take it to your what you call it, the folks that buy commercials on. It was tough. We had to slap them, but then we've developed a very good relationship since that time. It has become now where they automatically call us whenever there's an issue, and they cover both sides. And I think that's what it's going to have to take with Univision in Washington, D.C., because I guarantee that Telemundo is MSNBC owned. And, I mean, the guy just froths at the mouth on TV. You know, he gets going like those other characters on MSNBC. Telemundo, at least, I mean, on Univision, at least he's a little bit more calm about it, but they're still taking jabs at us. For every one conservative that they talk to, they'll talk to 10 or 8 liberals. So in that aspect of it, you know, we've got to bring it around in some form or fashion. And the best way that I can see is we got to bring it to their attention. We got to confront them. We got to confront them. We got to push on it.
Well, George, I think the real answer is we need a Spanish Fox News.
Yeah, right. That's true. We need a Spanish language Rush Limbaugh.
I want to chime in on that. And I use it to great advantage. And since I am a fluent Spanish speaker, Telemundo, Univision, and others are always asking me questions. And I use it as an opportunity to speak about what's going on in Washington from my point of view and from the point of view of what I consider to be what needs to be heard in the Spanish-speaking community. No matter how they try to twist it or what it is, I need to establish my credibility and speak what I believe and what I see. So it really doesn't matter to me whether they want to give it a liberal bent or not. I think that the person and what he says speaks louder.
All right, that concludes the audience questions. We now will go into lightning round, which consists of one question, and I'll start with George and go down. And it's very simple. The question is Hispanic or Latino?
Gosh, American.
All right. Congressman.
You know, I've never liked Hispanic. I like Latino because when I go see my cousins and relatives in Mexico, they always talk about Latinos. I think that sounds better. It dances a little better.
All right. Representative?
Joshua, I'll give you the answer that I was given back down in Corpus Christi at the Veterans Cemetery's inauguration. They said Tejano. There you go.
Very good. That is the correct answer.
I like that.
Thank you all very much. A round of applause for our panelists. They've really devoted their time. Thank you all so much.